these fish just ain't biting today. Oh well, a bad day of fishing's better than a day in the office.
Wait, you're supposed to be in the office today?
I called in sick, who cares?
But you brought your work phone with you. If you brought your work phone, then they can tell that you're wherever you are.
Yeah, they can't, who cares? They don't know I'm here.
They use GPS to see your location, even when you're not using your phone.
What? This? Ah!
Location data and privacy. What cell phones do to track your every move. We're going to tell you the steps to take to prevent your data from being sold. I'm Lainey Law.
And I'm attorney Andrew Myers.
And today we're going to be discussing your cell phones and your location data.
It's almost like these follow you. No, it's not almost like they follow you everywhere. They do follow you everywhere. I mean, they report to everybody. And it's really questionable whether anybody can do anything about it, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's certain steps that you can take. Like, a lot of people think like, oh, let me turn off my location data on my phone. But in reality, your phone is still connecting to different cell phone towers in order to get used. So there's certain levels of privacy that you have with that.
So in this video today, what we're going to tell you about is what companies have done tracking you and what steps are being taken to hopefully maybe do something about it.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, if you're watching this, I'm sure you're familiar, especially if you're watching this from your phone, which most of you probably are. When you open an app, a lot of the times it's like, oh, like, do you want to share this information? Do you want to share this information? And a lot of the times, apps that don't actually need your location to operate, where you can click no, they'll still ask you if you wanted to share that data. And a lot of people just hit yes a lot of the time.
Yeah, and the other thing is, it should be federally regulated, but it really hasn't been. The Federal Communications Commission, which would have prerogative over this area, is dealing with a Telecommunications Act that's almost 30 years old. I mean, the FCC, it's true, has actually cracked down and brought some actions against people that sell your personal data. But the Federal Communications, the Telecommunications Act was written way back in the 1990s, and there weren't any cell phones back then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's just like, even I think a lot of, because even like as we're seeing right now, like with all the talk about AI, sorry, misspeak, like things are changing so quickly, so rapidly, where, like you said, 1990s, it's just like people weren't even thinking really about all of this kind of stuff being sold. And it's just like how that's 30 years ago, and we went from computers not even being in every household to everybody having a computer in the palm of their hand. So
not only is the federal government really playing catch up, but now they've kind of left it to the states. Let's take a look at what some of the states are doing right now. Only 3 states as of right now, while we're doing this podcast, have laws that prohibit the sale of your location data. California, Colorado, and Virginia now have laws prohibiting applications from selling your data. Massachusetts now has a law that's pending. There was a hearing, and the bill is now stalled in the legislative process, but it looks like it'll probably pass. The thing about the United States' attempts by 3 or 4 states now is that they're not as strong as the European model. Over in Europe, the law that they have prohibits any data use of sensitive data. The burden of proof is on companies in Europe that they just may not sell your data. And if they do, the burden of proof, which is a legal buzzword that's very important, the burden of proof is on the companies to make sure that they don't deal with your personal data in a reckless manner. And if they do, they must prove that they have some kind of an exception. Now, the rules in the United States say, sure, consent is required, but the laws basically just say don't do it. The exceptions are for 911 or for legitimate police actions. There are 4 ways that smartphones track us all: cell phone triangulation, geolocation, Wi-Fi capture, Bluetooth pinging. Excuse me. Now, the Weather Channel was sued in California. We said we were going to show you some of the ways this has come up as an issue. One lawsuit was against the Weather Channel. You know how if you want to get your weather, you have to give them your location?
Mm-hmm.
Well, a lot of people think that's because they need to track where you are. Well, that's not really true. As long as you tell them once you're in New York, you can be in Cambodia or you can be in Mexico, and they know that you want the weather in New York. So the ongoing tracking was happening on a regular basis with the Weather Channel. So they were sued out in Los Angeles. The claim was that the Weather Channel tricked millions of users into allowing the sale of personal location data to third parties. The case was settled out of court. And the terms of the settlement, if there was a monetary settlement, that part is confidential, but the Weather Channel must now warn users that, yes, your location data is for sale. And the location tracking sale disclosure screen must be more obvious. Did you ever notice that when you go into a new app, they say, can we use your location data?
Mm-hmm.
But did you ever read way down into it to see, what it really means?
No shot. Yeah, nobody's scrolling through the terms of service.
Because it goes on for pages and pages and pages. Well, as part of the settlement against the Weather Channel, they were required to now make it more obvious. Well, did they really? Here's what. If you do go way into the Weather Channel's pages as to what you agree to, it says, if you grant permission, we may use and share your device's location to deliver you ads relevant to your location and to provide and improve the services. Further, if you have enabled personalization advertising, we may use and share your device's location data with trusted partners to deliver ads that are relevant to you based on places you've been. And so that's why if you've been to one coffee shop and now you're driving by another one, you might get a little pop-up.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the Massachusetts proposal. We pointed out earlier that 3 states do now have laws in the United States, and Massachusetts is working on one. Here's some of the actual language. It's a quite lengthy bill, as most legislation is, but here's what it says. It shall be unlawful for a covered entity to collect or process an individual's location information except for a permissible purpose, and the law defines that. Prior to collecting or processing an individual's location information for one of those permissible purposes, a covered entity shall provide the individual with a copy of the location policy and obtain consent from that individual. The consent that you give when you click on a little screen expires under one of 3 circumstances: after 1 year, or when the purpose expires, or when it is revoked. And there's a $5,000 penalty per sale of location data if it violates this law. And that $5,000 penalty can be enforced either by the Massachusetts Attorney General or by the individual. So that's pretty much what is going on nationally. It started in California and Virginia. It's moving to Massachusetts, but the laws are kind of a patchwork, and they're going state by state.
Mm-hmm. And it's a little bit scary too, because when it comes to selling this information of people, a lot of people, like Snapchat is a good example, where it might even kind of gamify your information, where if you go on Snapchat, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but you can zoom out, or I don't even remember how you access it anymore, but it'll show you a map of the United States and where all your friends are located on that map. And
Right.
It's a feature you can turn off, but it's just oh, look how cute. I've actually been with people, I don't have that on, but I've been with people that they get a text message, oh, why are you over here? Because people are just seeing them on their phone, and it's just if it's something that can cause a little bit of conflict in your personal life, it's just obviously there's value to that, and a lot of people aren't thinking about how much value their information and their location and things like that actually have.
Yeah, I've seen that map in other contexts, not on Snapchat, but on other contexts. I'm trying to remember what they are, but I've actually been online and seen that map you're talking about, and they know, even if you don't give them. The thing that scares me is that these laws are geared to the situation where you want an app, whether it's the Weather Channel or whether it's Facebook or Snapchat or whatever. And you get the little screen is, do you consent to giving us the location data? So sure, you push the button. But my concern is that they can tell where you are even without that. And they give those little maps and they know where you are. So there's already been a question about whether the laws that do exist in California and elsewhere, and that Massachusetts is considering, whether those laws really are effective in terms of tracking people. If they want to track you, they're going to track you. And I mean, we've talked previously on this podcast about the Alexander Murdoch case and the case against Brian Koberg and how they caught those guys by tracking them. And it wasn't necessarily the tracking data, but was the other methods that I mentioned in that slide earlier. They can, through cell tower triangulation and through Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, they can tell where you are and where you've been and what you're doing. And yes, technically, of course, under the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution, they are required to get a warrant. And apparently, if you follow the Murdoch or the Koberg case, they did at some point get warrants. But if the information is available and if the information is out there, to me, I have concerns whether everyone is going through the nicety of going before a judge and then the requirement constitutionally of getting a warrant. That information's out there. So what scares me is that, sure, valid, legitimate law enforcement may go through the legal process that's required by the Constitution, but I have concerns as to whether other people that aren't so valid and might be slightly nefarious, whether they're tracking us without going to court.
Mm-hmm. And like how you mentioned, like other, entities that have a little bit more nefarious intention behind them. We've seen kind of right now there's like a phenomenon with like crypto gambling where it's just like you have these companies that operate out of small like jurisdictions outside of like laws that prohibit those types of things. And it's just like if you already have like, and that's a whole like bright shiny colors, oh look, you can have money. It's just like a company like that, like are they like they're already doing a lot of sketchy stuff. Do you really think that they're taking into consideration like your privacy with your data, your location? It's just like if you're on a phone with something sketchy like that, even if it's like an app that you know from a friend of a friend, you can't really, there's so much stuff out there where how can you be really sure where your data is going and if it's being used for ethical purposes?
Right. And we were looking at a article from the New York Times before we came on here that some of this location tracking is accurate to within, they're able to determine where you are at 14,000 different times during one day.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not a math major, I never was, but they can break your day down into 14,000 different increments and know where you are. Okay, right now we're in the studio. 5 minutes from now, we might be in my office. 10 minutes from now, where are you going to be? So then there's actually people that say, well, I never do anything wrong, so it's okay. Well, okay, that's fine for you. But just the idea that they can track your location to within 3 or 4 yards, I believe it is, and they can break your day down into 14,000 different parts. Okay, sure. Andy has a boring life. He went to the office and he'll probably go to the sandwich shop for lunch and then he'll go home and walk the dog. Okay, but do you want that kind of tracking? I mean, do you want them knowing that you're at a certain medical facility, or do you want them knowing that you went for your Botox injection, or do you want them to know that now you're in the salon, or, sure. It's good to catch criminals. It's good to catch, if it helps them solve some cold cases, I'm all for it. And I'm all for them going to court and getting a warrant to do so. But I don't know. It just doesn't seem right that there is now the technical capability to break your day down into 14,000 time increments and 3 or 4 yard place increments. I mean, I feel bad for the poor guy in our video at the beginning who was out fishing when he should have been at work. But I mean, there are privacy concerns, and I don't think anyone can really legitimately question that. Do you?
Yeah, and I mean, because you said 14,000. I had to Google, and it's like how many minutes are in a day, and it says 1,440. So how many times a minute? To think about that, are they sending your data back and forth? And like on top of that, it's like even like legal things. With peace and love, you mentioned like, oh, they saw you getting Botox. That reminds me that on like Instagram with peace and love to this company, I believe they're in Nashville, but I keep getting advertisements for cheap filler. I do know, like, I don't want filler, but if I were to get filler, I do not want it cheap. But it's just like, oh, they know you're a girl, they know you live in this area. Let's try to push this on them. And that's really scary too when you think about things like kids, like your kids' information's out there. If I'm a woman getting these ads, what are your kids getting when they share their location?
Well, that's a really serious concern. And just a little anecdote that, kind of scary, kind of strange. I have two offices, one in the Merrimack Valley of Massachusetts, and one is in Derry, New Hampshire, right outside of Manchester, New Hampshire. One of my offices is in the same location as a Planned Parenthood office, and they're fine. We coexist. They're in another part of the building. I'm in this part of the building. We're two totally separate businesses. Well, one time I had a client here in the office, and when she left, she called me later that day, kind of laughing, but kind of not, because her husband just happened to track her to Planned Parenthood.
Oh my
And
gosh.
she wasn't there. She was here.
Uh-huh.
It was a case that had
Mhm.
nothing. It was a domestic case. It was a car accident case. So it really had nothing to do with anything. And once she explained to her husband where he was like, oh, well, I knew you were going over there, but I didn't know you were going to go over to Planned Parenthood. So, I mean, that's only one scenario, but there's a lot of office buildings like mine that have different types of facilities, medical facilities, all kinds of different facilities. Use your imagination. And so is that right that for whatever reason, at one point we did geolocate my office on Google, and for some reason that's lost. We got to talk to the IT guy about that. But anyhow, that's just like one of many, many, many kind of scary things. I mean, sometimes in my travels, I pass a gun firing range in Manchester. And is that reported to people that I'm in the gun firing range? I mean, not that it makes a difference, but
But for them to know, and like how you mentioned with the person like seeing that their spouse was going to Planned Parenthood, this may be like a little bit of a different situation. I'm not sure behind this, but I've known people in my life personally that were in abusive relationships and trying to get out of that. The person is somehow able to know where they're going. There's so many like, versus that, like whether it's an app, whether it's like a key tag that you put on someone's car, something like that. No ideas, please don't do that. But it's just like location is like, that information is really valuable. Like you said, you could be at a gun range and it's just like now they know. And it's just like also like the companies know, but like we talked about before, is just like who else is seeing that? If you have Snapchat, other people are seeing you do stuff too, which is pretty weird, pretty unsettling.
Well, just the idea that if somebody does come to an attorney's office with something that's more sensitive than a car accident, if there's a total right of confidentiality. If somebody goes to see an attorney, that's confidential, and we would never, by law and by our ethical rules that pertain to attorneys, we're not allowed to disclose that to anyone, whether they retain us or not. If somebody comes in for a free consultation, that confidentiality shield protects the attorney-client visit. So just for the fact that, if you have these family plans on phones, you can track each other. And as you said, if someone is going through an abusive relationship and the abuser tracks the person to a law office, that's just, So my question, and there's no answer yet, there may be someday, but my question is, are all of these pieces of legislation that are very well intended, I'm sure, but are they going to do anything? Is it, you can pass every law you want to, but as my great grandfather, and he didn't make this up, he was a legislator, he was a congressman from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. As he said, you cannot legislate human behavior. So I'm not saying they shouldn't even try, but I'm just questioning whether we did a podcast a few weeks ago about unenforceable laws, and I wonder if this one should go in that bucket.
Yeah, because like you said, I mean, there's always going to be bad actors, And on top of that, even with the laws, I think there's like a saying, it's like everyone's just like a temporarily embarrassed billionaire or whatever, where it's like maybe some people are like, oh, that's a great idea. Like I'm going to sell, like I'm going to collect data and sell this information. And that's going to be how I make my empire. Which, you know, it would be nice if the laws could help enforce, protect the people, help enforce the protection of people's data.
Yeah, I agree
But
100%. I guess I read through the piece of legislation in Massachusetts, and it seemed like it was a good shot. The first few pages are a definitional section, and then they say that you shouldn't sell personal location data. But so what? I mean, that's Massachusetts. What if these people that are tracking you are in Illinois or Florida or, you know, wherever, any of the 50 states, suppose they're in Alaska? Is Massachusetts really going to use the law? And there is such a thing as the long arm of the law that, you know, sure, there's jurisdiction, but is the Massachusetts court going to reach out to someone who is in, you know, Guam or Puerto Rico? I mean, I just, you know, I don't, it really should be federal. Although the federal government has kind of dropped the ball on it, they're not really doing it. They haven't updated the Telecommunications Act for almost 30 years, but that's where it would seem to me where it has to be. But in that hasn't happened, I see why 3 states and now maybe Massachusetts are going to go forward with that legislation.
Yeah, like you said, I don't really like, there's so like, even if it happens on like a state by state basis, is just like realistically what's going to happen, like you said, like to all these little like random places all around the world, where it's almost like it's for show almost, because it's just like a state, it's just like, yeah, we're doing stuff, but it's only going to really apply to things happening in this state. I mean, they are I don't even remember what site what country, what state it was, but it's funny to me too, because there was some state that banned like the distribution of adult material to minors. So when you sign up to view adult content, I don't remember if it says this is not available in your state or if it's not available unless you like show your ID or whatever it was, but people just use a VPN to get around it anyway. So it's just like you can create these laws, but when it's not done on a grand scale and there's no system in place to enforce them, it's just for show, it feels.
VPN, very private network. See, I'm not but anyhow. Okay, why don't we do our subscribe, like? Don't you usually do that?
Yeah. Oh my god.
Did you have any closing thoughts before we do that?
I really don't. You know, just make sure if you're watching this, you know, make sure not to give, you know, your location data to companies that don't need it. I always, when things ask for permissions, I say no, you know, and whatever it needs to use it, and just be conscientious of what you're using and how other people are going to access that. Remember that when you're turning off your location data on your phone, it's not the same as turning your phone off. You're still going to be connecting to those towers. So definitely pay attention to your own security. And if you made it this far, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We really appreciate you watching our video today, and we are looking forward to seeing you in the next one.
I agree. Remember, you're not paranoid. They are following you. Please like, subscribe, and follow us. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
You have been watching About the Law, a production of the law offices of Andrew D. Myers in Methuen in the Merrimack Valley of Massachusetts and in Derry, just outside of Manchester, New Hampshire. Remember to click the like and subscribe buttons down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to share it with your friends and others. If you'd like to talk to me about an injury case, a car accident, a slip and fall, a serious bodily injury case, or some other case, please feel free to contact me. I'd love to talk to you. You can contact us through my website at attorney-myers.com. We have a contact us block, or you can call on one of the telephone numbers we've given there, or you can email me at andrew@attorney-myers.com. The foregoing is offered for informational purposes only. It is not intended as and does not constitute legal advice. Laws vary widely from state to state. You should rely only on the advice given to you during a personal consultation by a local attorney thoroughly familiar with state laws and the area of practice in which your concern lies. This podcast must be and hereby is labeled advertisement in some jurisdictions.